Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top-quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, where our goal is to help you live your best audacious life ever. I'm Audley Stevenson, and so appreciative of you once again for taking the time and checking out the program. Of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so please give us a like and follow on those platforms and be connected and stay connected to all things audacious living. You can also click that subscribe button on our YouTube channel, and that way any content that comes out, you'll get those notifications and you're all set. So, as far as today's episode goes, we've got a good one in store for you because we'll be joined by Celina Caesar-Chavannes, who is a former federal member of parliament with the Liberal government, as well as former Parliamentary Secretary to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Her political career lasted for one term for 4 years, and at the end of her term, she opted to step down and not seek re-election. She chronicles the details behind her decision to not continue in politics in her new book entitled, Can You Hear Me Now? How I Found My Voice and Learned to Live with Passion and Purpose. Definitely is a great read, and we're going to get into that with her. In her post-political career, Celina actively advocates for equity and inclusion, and has also become a strong champion for mental health. Like I said, we'll talk about her book. We'll talk about all the things that's going on in her world, and it'll really give you a good opportunity to even understand the inner workings of what goes on behind the scenes in government. Again, her book is Can You Hear Me Now? How I Found My Voice and Learned to Live with Passion and Purpose. Like I said, it's definitely a good one. So without further ado, I'm going to give you an opportunity to hear from Celina. Enjoy. Celina Caesar-Chavannes is the author of the new book, Can You Hear Me Now? How I Found My Voice and Learned to Live with Passion and Purpose. From 2015 to 2019, Chavannes was a member of Parliament with the Liberal Party and held the position of Parliamentary Secretary to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Since leaving politics, she's now chronicled her personal and professional life in her book, which is filled with victories, setbacks, and lessons learned along the way. Celina is up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. Celina, how are you today? Glad you could be here with us.
I am so glad to be here on a snowy day.
Yes, we're snowed in. And welcome to Canada, right? This is what it is.
Yeah. Are you in Toronto?
I am. Well,
yeah.
actually,
So I'm in
Brampton, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I get you loud and clear. Listen, I got out early this morning. I was plowing, and the snow plow went by. And after I got all my driveway all cleared off, the plow came by and plugged me in. So I had to do that again. So I'm feeling good.
I sent my husband out early in the morning. I didn't realize how much snow was out there until I'm like looking at my neighbors, and they have the snow blower going. Yes. And it's like, that is a lot of snow.
Yes, it is. Yes.
I should have helped him, but I didn't. I stayed in bed.
That's okay. You've been busy, Celina, so I get it. I get it. So speaking of busy, your book is taking you all over the place. You're on an incredible little mini tour here, and I guess it's been pretty good thus far, hasn't it?
Yeah, it debuted at number 4 on the national bestsellers list. So really excited about that. I'll be a lot more excited when it gets to number 1, which I have all of my friends like, buy 10. You have people. I know you have people you want to give this book to.
That's fair.
But if I'm asking everybody to buy 10, they're like, so who am I going to give my 10 to? Because you're asking the people I'm going to give a book to buy 10. Like, that's not a problem we need to worry about right now.
That's someone else's issue. I just buy the book.
That's your problem, not mine.
That's right. And so just the book is, Can You Hear Me Now? How I Found My Voice and Learned to Live with Passion and Purpose. And I want to start off with the title because I had an opportunity. I read through from cover to cover. You told your whole life story. As much as you had your political career seems to get a lot of spotlight and attention, that's really a small portion of the book. And your whole life prior to politics, really, there's a story in that in itself. And the other thing I found interesting is throughout reading your life story, I didn't get the impression that you had a problem finding your voice or making yourself heard. So I wonder if you can sort of talk about the title and how that sort of came to be.
So you know what, my editor and I, we were going back and forth. My editor's Anne Collins at Penguin Random House, Canada. And we were going back and forth and we just could not come up with a title. And my husband, who named my company, he's like, can you hear me now? And we're like, wow, that's good. And it's not so much that, I just think that sometimes you want people to understand that, yes, like, can you hear me now? Like, it's actually right. I'm speaking. It's almost like, I'm speaking. Like, you have to reiterate the fact that you want to emphasize this notion of, you haven't been listening. Right. I've been telling you what you needed to do. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Right. So it's as powerful around finding your voice as it is around emphasizing the fact that you had an opportunity to listen to my voice and you didn't.
And I can see where that can be a really frustrating question, right? There's nothing worse than not being heard, not being listened to, feeling like you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. So I think when we sort of talk about what your experiences, I imagine there've been a lot of frustrations in trying to get your voice heard.
Well, I think I think too, it doesn't matter what title you have, right? So whether I'm Parliamentary Secretary to a leader of a G7 country, an entrepreneur, a mom, a wife, it's like, can you hear me now? Because I told you not to do that and now you're in trouble. And I told you before, you didn't listen, but can you hear me now?
No. It makes total sense. You definitely went all in terms of just exposing or telling your entire story. And I want you to sort of talk about that process, because I would imagine it took a lot out of you, certainly emotionally, I would imagine mentally, to sort of put it all on paper and first feel comfortable with it. Because you are, when anytime you're sort of exposing yourself, if you will, you're being a little bit vulnerable, so that feeling comfortable with it and actually doing it. What do you can talk about that?
So again, I have to refer back to a great editor that I had with Anne, and she said to me, do you want a book that hurts or heals? Mm. And, I really think I could have written a story that is so I wrote a story about a lot of the lows in my life, but a roller coaster. I could have written a story about the high points too. And I thought, well, that's what Google's for. Google has captured all the high points, right? I think it's important for people to understand how you get to this version of yourself, how you get to the blinged out version. Like, it didn't just happen overnight and all of a sudden you got bling. There was some blood, sweat, and tears that went into that. And I think most importantly, I think back to, the time after I left university and thinking that's the lowest point in my life. I am never going to accomplish anything ever. Yeah. And then here I am, right? So I want people to know that, yes, at the lowest lows, there is a possibility of having some really high highs after that. But you can't do that if you're not talking about them.
Got you. I oftentimes talk about the fact that sort of on the other side of kind of adversity and challenges, that's where all the great stuff lies, right? And maybe in that exact moment, right, you feel like this is it. But there's, the victory in actually getting up and going, okay, let's proceed ahead, right?
Yeah, well, everybody has to do that. Like, everybody has to get themselves up, dust themselves off every now and again and start all over again. But we don't usually hear the nitty gritty of that story, like the thought process of the story. And that's why that whole chapter around university is in there, because it was like a well thought out terrible plan.
Right.
And so you're like, okay, don't do that again.
Right.
Ask questions. Here are the things that you need to learn. Don't be in the tangled web that you weave. It's not worth it. And then it speaks to the point too of why I'm so particular about standing in my values later on in life. People often think that they have these instances of pain and they dismiss them. But if I didn't have that pain, if I didn't have that hurt, if I didn't have that shame and guilt,
Right.
I wouldn't be able to advocate for mental health, for getting equity, for challenges that our people are facing. So it's important parts of the story are the painful parts.
You got it. You sort of touched on the university piece, and one last thing before we move on, the idea of reducing your course load, I thought was a really cool analogy for life in order to sort of move forward, because we want to jump all in, right?
Oh my God, you know what? I'm writing in the back of my book. This is my version, right?
Okay.
Like I wrote it and I'm still writing all this stuff. But I'm writing all the themes that people find that I didn't know existed in the book.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a great analogy just for life. Sometimes you gotta slow that down. So I'll give you a second to write the notes there. But I think
go ahead. Go ahead.
But no,
and write them in the back.
Yeah, but it really truly is, because we jump all in, right? And we think this is what it's supposed to be. And there are times when we've just got to slow it down.
Slow down. And you know what the thing is though, that we often get these little signals, either through our mental health or people saying like, our friends aren't calling us as much, or our families kind of disconnect. Like we feel it, but yet still we're like, oh, well, I got to save the world today, and I got to put on this, and I got to water the plants, and I got to cook the meal, and I got to like start the meeting. And it's like, well, no, just chill for 5 minutes. It'll be all right.
Right. I wonder how much of that
6 courses.
Yeah, well, this is it, right? I wonder how much of that is just sort of even. I mean, some of it might be sort of gender roles or what we think we should be doing or what we're supposed to be doing. But again, it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't, and I'm not sure if this is genderfied, or I don't know, because I'm not a man. I can't really figure out whether men tend to compartmentalize things. Like I know, like even with my husband, he's like, I'm doing this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. Okay. And I'm like, you could walk and chew gum at the same time. He's like, I don't want to.
Okay.
He's okay with it. I'm like, yes, you got to walk and chew gum.
I can relate to that one. I can relate to that one.
I'm not attacking you, oddly, I swear.
I want to talk about the importance in forgiving our past mistakes and hurts and disappointments. Really easy to kind of wallow and you feel sorry for ourselves or even beat ourselves up. You've told many stories where you had to actually do that. I want to sort of talk about the significance in our own lives and finding forgiveness.
You know what? And that is a difficult journey to be on if you don't know you're on it. If you don't know that you're on that, if you don't know that the end goal is to eventually forgive yourself. And I think for me, because politics was so painfully beautiful, as I describe it in the book, it was painful, and it really caused me to examine all of the parts of me, and then realize, no, I actually do forgive. So there's one part of the book where I say, no, my mistakes don't own me. But I didn't realize that I could actually forgive those mistakes until I started writing, and the cathartic experience of putting things down on paper and saying, I'm okay with that. And I wrote parts of it, and I've read this book maybe 10 times, and there are still parts of it that I can't read without crying. And I still cry, and I'm still like, oh, maybe I should take that out. And I get my pen. I'm like, darn it, too many people have purchased the book. I can't cross it out.
Too late now. It's like you've committed, you're all in, right? Like
I have the pen, I'm ready. I'm like, it's like, darn it.
Too late now.
Somebody read it.
Yeah, no, and that's it. But again, that just kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, just putting it all out there and accepting it for what it is. I think the other part too is that what people take from that, we never really know. Here you are, you're writing little points in your book now of what you're getting, and that you never necessarily maybe not have connected with yourself, but other people who the way they relate or how they connect with it can, that brings that perspective. So again, there, they talk about, there's an expression, there's a message in our messes, right? And I think that's sort of encapsulating what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, there's been a few conversations. The book's only been out for a couple of weeks, but I have all these notes of people saying, the gray sense of unbelonging, like you said that right in the beginning, and then it's again in university. I was like, whoa, chills. Let me write that down. There's just so many themes that people have pulled from the book, I guess, from their own lives. But again, you can't pull things from a book. And what I really wanted to be disruptive in writing this book, because I wanted people to be able to, number one, say, okay, I'm not the first one to make a mistake. Because clearly, have you read this? Celina was like the worst, and she didn't turn out all bad. But I also wanted people to be able to see themselves, maybe not in the exact experience, but in the tones, in the themes and the arcs that were present in the book. And I don't think we have an opportunity to really do that in our world right now, because we live in this Instagram filtered everything. Your eyelashes are this long and your hair is all flowy and your skin is even. This is a version of the world we're living in.
Right.
And we cannot get down to that point where we're actually connecting on a human level when we've filtered all of the scars away.
Right. You must have had a huge sort of sigh, emotional, when it was all said and done, and you pressed send off the editor, and the book was completed. What was that like? Because again, sort of talked about crying as you're writing the book and all the emotions that you had. There must have been like, okay, you birthed your baby, if you will. It's here.
So I didn't have a sense of relief until a couple people read it.
Okay.
So my daughters read it, and my cousin Debbie read it, her daughter read it. And when they responded to me and they were like, this is really good. So my daughter, actually, my eldest, Desiree, she comes upstairs one day and she's like, I'm like, Desiree, dinner, because we always have dinner together as a family. We always sit down, have dinner together. And then, Desiree, come up for dinner. She's like, I'm reading the book. I'm like, Desiree, clearly you know the story. Like, come up for dinner. And she's like, oh man, I hope Celina and Vidal stay together. She's like, she said it was so good. She said it was like reading the backstory of her life, right? Like all of the stuff she didn't know happened. She's reading all that. So it was really, and then when I started getting people like reviewing it and emailing and commenting, that's when I had a sense of relief, because you just don't know how it's going to be received, right? So even if I press then, the editor has it, it goes to print, and I'm like, okay, we can't make any more changes now. And people are like, I hate it. I don't know what I would have done. Oh my God, I would have died.
Yeah, no, I understand.
But people are loving it. They're loving the book.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I can certainly see that. And everything I've seen thus far, and I've had an opportunity to hear you talk in some other circles, and it's been well received, and rightfully so. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I want to sort of move into your political career. Like I said, that seemed to get a bulk of the attention. In my viewpoint, there's a lot more, but I mean, certainly I can understand that why, especially when you're battling with the Prime Minister, and it's well publicized. But before that, I wonder if you sort of talk about your expectations as a rookie MP. Your first, you land in this role. Everyone knows the work that goes into reaching that level. You get there. What are your expectations?
So I actually bought the goods that the party was selling at the time: open, transparent, government done differently. When they said add women, change politics, and diversity is our strength, I interpreted that as, why we're taking an intersectional feminist approach. Man, this is where I want to be. Right. We're gonna transform the world with this party, right? 42nd Parliament is gonna be lit.
That's
it's like, what can't we do? And then, so I bought all that in the campaign. Yeah. Then we got in there with 180 plus people majority. And I was like, man, we about to change. Like, things are going to change.
Yep.
Right? We've taken an intersectional feminist approach. We're open, we're transparent, government done differently. We're so opposite Harper's government.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we got a majority, and not just like a little majority, like we got like kill the game majority.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're good.
We're on the whole one side of Parliament and wrapping around on the beachhead.
Yeah.
Man, come on, man. So I'm feeling good.
Sure.
I'm thinking every single bit of inequity that exists, especially around the brain, because my company was, a lot of brain research. I thought every single inequity that exists, we're going to handle this.
Right.
4 years. That's it. We're good.
Mm. And how long did it take you, did the realization set in?
A month, a couple months.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was really before that April. So got elected in October, appointed as Parliamentary Secretary in December of 2015. By about April of 2016, I was like, I'm really beginning to believe that this is not intersectional feminism. And maybe they actually just meant diversity, not actually equity. Right. When they were talking about, add women, change politics, it just was like, add women, we could have different window dressing.
Got you.
Yeah, and it was more performative than substantive.
But was there still a side of you that thought that was, okay, fine, it's not what I thought it was, but we still can make that change? Was there a piece of you that felt, because you didn't give up right away at that point?
Right. Yeah. So when we put in the budget around the $5 billion for mental health, I thought, okay, you're able to accomplish, and that's why I call it a painfully beautiful experience, because you're able to accomplish a lot. And then around 2017, 2018, I started thinking of, I could vote on legislation, but there's other things that I want to do around creating awareness on things that are very important to me. So that was critical in some of the work that I did in Parliament. So yeah, I wasn't completely jaded.
Sure.
I think I was more disillusioned by the internal mechanics of partisan party politics, right. Not Parliament as a whole, as an institution, but the partisan nature of the games that are played, even internal to your own party.
Wow.
That's where I had a lot of the, what are you guys doing? Like the questions that I had, I was like, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? It just seems so juvenile, the games we were playing. It didn't make sense.
I've had an opportunity to sit down with the Honorable Jean Augustine, who talked about, the first Black woman in the House of Commons, and she talked a lot about not having the breadcrumbs from someone that was there before, so that she can follow along. Yeah. That still wasn't the case for you when you got there, I'd imagine. That hadn't changed.
No, well, because it's so few and far in between, right? So, even with me and Marcy Ian, who's now the only Black female member of Parliament out of the 338, there was still some months in between. So by the time, I leave and she gets in, right, all them little mice in Parliament done ate up all them crumbs already. So the best we could do is say, okay, Marcy, here's my number. Call me if you need me. I know it's going to be tough, but let me just holler at me if you need me for anything.
Right.
And I think that's the critical piece, right? That memory piece. But that's also why I was very intentional about being honest about my experiences, because I just didn't want anybody else to be surprised, right, that there is challenges in Parliament at a federal level.
Right. An important conversation that you had when you were named Parliamentary Secretary was that you didn't want it to be about tokenism, right? That you wanted to, that purpose is sort of a role. You want to sort of talk about that, because I thought that was it was almost insightful, so to speak, before even getting into it, or you realized sort of what was going to happen to you.
Right. So, I think that was triggered, though, by the fact that when cabinet was named, so up until that point, I was really still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And then cabinet was named, and it gave me a real shock and awe, sort of eye-opening moment where, we announced it's because it's 2015, you have gender parity, and then the announcement comes out, all the news comes out, it says, this is the face of Canada. And I was like, let me just double check here. I'll look at it good. I don't see a lot of different people in this cabinet, but I don't see any Black. And I looked, I was like, let me just double check. let me make sure. I did all the when your moms or your aunties are FaceTiming you and they have their face all in the thing like that.
Exactly.
I was all in it going, there has to be something wrong here. Like, am I nuts? And so I publicly said, no, that is not the face of Canada.
Right.
And I think that was like the first, as I say in the book, the first strike against me. But that's what I thought open, transparent government was, that you would want someone to say, no, you made a horrible mistake here. And it wasn't just a mistake. You have actually made me feel not only that I don't belong,
right,
but that you don't even notice that I'm here and what you're saying is actually a slight against me.
Right.
And so sitting down with the Prime Minister in that December conversation, I was like, look, let me tell you something. You never want a Black woman to start off a conversation. Let me tell you something. I'm not interested in any gender or racial gaps that you may have in your cabinet. I'm perfectly happy being the member of Parliament for Whitby. I don't need a title. I need to get to work. And the tension in that room was a little obvious,
right,
but I was still hopeful.
Sure. Well, of course. It's still very early in the game, so to speak, for you.
The game hadn't even started.
Right, there we go. So I could see that, and I think at that time, if I'm the Prime Minister and hearing that message, that's an opportunity for me to actually show you that that's not the case.
Well, yes, it would have been. It would have been an opportune opportunity to make sure that did not happen, especially when that's the first sentence of that conversation, right? Like, I'm being very serious that this is an opportunity for me to get to work. There's a lot of inequity that exists. And at that time, I wasn't even thinking about just Black communities. And I don't think I've ever done that. I've always been very intersectional about who I advocate for when it comes to equity and equity-seeking groups.
Yep.
But I didn't want to be I didn't want to fall into like the trope character or the individual that was assigned to the Black file. And I didn't want to be the angry Black woman either.
Yep. Well, and that's important that you don't, because that's one you talk about, sort of the misconceptions that are out there, that if you're a Black woman, you must be angry or something.
Yeah. And I was very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing, like, even right now, I get these messages, oh, why are you attacking the Prime Minister? Well, first of all, I'm asking for things that were promised. I'm asking for the repeal of mandatory minimums. I'm asking for there to be more representation. I'm asking for things that he holds the pen on delivering. Yes. He could actually, with the stroke of a pen, say, we're going to do that.
Yep.
So for me to push him to be better, man, drop the fragility, because I'm not about it.
Right. Well, and it's not actually a bad thing. I mean, as a leader of whether your household, the company, the government, whatever.
A G7 country.
Well, this is it, right? Like, if people are pushing you, right? I think that's an opportunity. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but again, maybe it's a fragility thing, like you said, or not maybe. I think it is, but it's not a bad thing at all.
And I think it's who it comes from too, right? When you're not used to getting messages of strength from diversified individuals who are unafraid and uninhibited to say, no, you're doing wrong, you're messing up. And they're like, whoa, why? We've never heard anybody talk to us like this before. Like, no, dude, get your act together. You're messing this up. And there is this propensity, I think, within partisan politics, that if it doesn't come, like if the message doesn't come from the internal structure, meaning PMO, PM, cabinet, then it's sort of, well, let's downplay it, and then we'll come up with a similar idea and run with it like it's ours.
We did it. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Oh, that's exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think exhausting is a great word, and we've seen that many, many times before. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about racism and sort of your experiences with that, wearing your hair in braids publicly as a sign of solidarity, things that. So you stood there and you've advocated. In terms of where Canada is, and I mean, I kind of know the answer, I know what you're going to say, but I want to ask it anyway. In terms of where Canada is as a country, how far along are we, would you say? addressing racism and maybe we're talking a lot about a bit more, but we're talking about the eradication of it. Where do you think Canada is?
We're not even started yet. Until you could get all leaders at all levels in all departments to actually be able to contextualize, define, and find examples of systemic racism, and not only understand it from a present day perspective, but understand the root cause. So when you think about Parliament, it was built on exclusionary principles. Indigenous people, Black people, women were not part of the structure. Hence the reason why there isn't a dress code for women in politics, in Parliament. Hence the reason why I intentionally showed up. If you look at some of the pictures that I have, most days I'm in my nice swag, but other days I'm in jeans and a t-shirt intentionally, because there's no dress code. It was built on exclusionary practices and reinforced by exclusionary, oppressive, and racist policies.
Yep.
So how do you expect the end result, or how do you expect the fruit from that tree to be edible to Black communities when the root is rotten?
Right. It's interesting because for a lot of people, you can't get to even agree what kind of tree it is, right? So like, well, we don't see it. What are you talking about? It's not clear. I'm not a racist. I mean, you get those sorts of languages which totally discounts the experiences, the real experiences that that people are going through and have lived.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we don't have to look so far as even right now with COVID-19 to see these disparities, to see the government of Ontario in April 2020 say that they're not going to collect race-based data, and the city of Toronto say, yes, we're going to collect it, and be able to identify those hotspots. We're only talking about hotspots now because they did the work that was required to identify them, right? So it's the difference between taking a racist approach by saying, no, we're not going to collect it, knowing that Black people are largely disproportionately affected, and taking an anti-racist approach and saying that we're going to collect the data because what we're getting from the United States is telling us that we should. And that there's something inherently problematic when you as a government, your job is to maintain the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Very much. You've got there's a class action lawsuit of Black employees who, ironically enough, I happen to be one of them, who did not receive promotions or jobs advancements, and now we're that lawsuit is fighting back. And that's within the government, right? That's the leader that's supposed to guide the rest of the country, and there's problems within that structure. So it's rampant, and there's a lot of work still to be done, with no question.
So I hope people see that, some of my experiences, especially in chapter 10 and 11, 12, 13, my 4 years in politics, are really a microcosm of what is happening on the macro level in our government institutions. That yes, there is a class action lawsuit. There isn't not only is there not representation throughout the federal public service in senior positions, even when we look at heads, ambassadors around the world, how many of them are Black? How many appointments are Black? But even when we're in there, you're wondering, well, where are they? Where are these meritorious candidates? Well, if you work at a place for 20, 30 years, and I sat and I listened to one woman's story, 20, 30 years, and not get a permanent promotion, there is something inherently evil about that.
Yep.
And so the response of the government, is probably going to be exactly what happened in the book, which is, well, we didn't, we don't really, well, we're going to, what? Like, where is the empathy? Where is the humanity? Where is the desire to create equity when you know for certain that there is inequity within a system? And you as a leader of that government, the tone is set from the top. Right. So people always talk to me about mandatory minimums. Well, it was the Attorney General. Well, it was this. Well, it was that. If the Prime Minister wanted mandatory minimums to be removed, it would have been removed, period, bar none. And you know what's going to happen? Because the United States is talking about removing mandatory minimums, all of a sudden it's going to be a priority. Right. And we're going to have a follow the leader instead of a leader in which people follow.
Gotcha. No, you're right.
That's the problem.
You're absolutely right. It's not a priority until it's made a priority for me. But
Yeah.
when you have an opportunity to get ahead of the curve, and we're talking about something that you can make a truly a significant difference in people's lives. Like, these are the types of decisions that we're talking about, and refusing not to do that, refusing to take that stand, it's just, you got to shake your head, right? Like, why?
You got to shake your head. And I talk about the tokenism. I talk about the exclusion. So 2016 was, I could just wrote that chapter called tokenism.
Yeah.
2017 is exclusion. And 2018 is gaslighting or destruction. And all of those three things are happening to Black communities across Canada on a mass scale, by this diversity is our strength feminist government. And, again, this is an opportunity for them to say, we're going to do things differently. When we're talking about destruction of Black families, the amount of Black and Indigenous people that we have sitting in a federal prison because of something like mandatory minimums, or the fact that we did not expunge records when we legalized cannabis, that's a different story. I'm not going to get into that today. But those things are destroying not just people's lives, their families,
Yep.
So where is this diversity is our strength? And is it only a hashtag, or is it something that you do where you try to create that equity?
Yep. Yep.
Very problematic.
It is. It is. So, Celina, you're not in politics anymore. Do you miss it?
A little bit. Can you tell? I do miss it. It was a job that I really loved. Unfortunately, I couldn't reconcile some of the things that I was seeing as outcomes with the principles that I hold very dear. It was impossible for me to stay in that structure where people say, you have to put your party above your principles. No thanks. I'm out. Bye.
We're good.
Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks.
But I'm certain that there were some positive things that have come out of your political experience, and I know we're highlighting, the down parts of it, but there were some positive aspects as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. Let's talk about the beautiful parts. The beautiful parts of politics. We talked about the painful, the beautiful. Beautiful. If I could just run them off real quickly, mental health, the investments that we made, $5 billion healthcare transfer 2017, right off the bat, second budget that we introduced is like revolutionary for young people under the age of 25. Absolutely spectacular. Then I get promoted to Parliamentary Secretary to International Development. First of all, I'm no longer Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, so I'm not US facing, thank God, because now we have Trump. So I'm like, send me anywhere but the United States, please. So I'm now in international development, and it's the best story Canada never tells, of people around the world, Canadians, organizations, NGOs, these amazing, mainly women, that are doing this incredible work. And then when disaster strikes, hurricane, flood, famine, they double down and do more. Like, this is our brand. This is the country that we are, right? Where people, no matter what, are trying, and I'm going to keep saying this word equity until people are like, well, what is the equity? But people are trying to create equity on a global scale. People are trying to leave no one behind, which is one of our the ultimate outcome of the Sustainable Development Goals, is to leave no one behind. So in the current context, when we talk about racial inequality in a pandemic, the most vulnerable person is the person we need to take care of. And that's who these organizations are taking care of around the world.
Amazing. See, great stuff, the beautiful stuff. Yeah.
Great stuff. Great international development work. Like, it's just, when you do it right, and I've seen it being done right, not in this kind of patronizing patriarchy kind of way where, we're going in there to fix the problem. No, when you're actually connected with the communities and listening to what they're saying, and then just giving them the tools to help them achieve what they want. Amazing. It is amazing.
Well, and it's certainly exhilarating and motivating in the sense of how much more that can be done, right?
Oh yeah.
There's lots of more opportunities. So I think that's a starting point. We just grow from there. It's amazing.
Yes. And it's something that like I continue to talk about.
Yeah,
You know,
good,
when I talk about equity, I think I learned it from that role in
good.
international development and learned it from a lot of the women in the global South who are making something out of, I won't even say nothing, out of negative nothing. Like, and they just create these miracles. And it really is a testament to resilience, to strength, and to the beauty of the human spirit. It really, something that I just absolutely loved.
Man, that's great, Celina. I've not only just enjoyed chatting with you, but the whole process, and I enjoyed the book. Hearing just the wonderful lessons and learnings that it seems that you're still getting from it after the book's already done. You're still getting them, so that's amazing. Is there any sort of one particular theme or one or two things that probably resonate with you the most in terms of when you think about what this book brings or leaves with you? What would you, can you identify?
So the one thing that I learned as I was writing it, and the one thing that I know I'll take with me forever,
Mhm.
is how powerful authenticity is and how powerful my voice is. You know, I wish I was able to, especially in chapter 10 and 11, where I was kind of like shaking my head a lot, going, what's going on? I wish I was able to understand that I was okay, that I could stand in my truth, I could stand in my strength, my intelligence, the everything, and bring that to bear. But that's hard to do if you don't understand that authenticity does require you to dig deep into the pain and the hurt and mistakes and add that to the beauty and the strengths and the joy. Put that together and it creates value in who you are. All of those experiences create that value in who you are. And therefore, you are an asset to every organization, school, institution that you're part of, conversation that you're engaged in, or policy that you develop. It's something that it took me writing this book to truly understand. And it's one of the things that I hope people really get out of the book, is that authenticity is so valuable.
And that's why it's so important that every experience that you go through, that you embrace it, whether the good ones or the perceived bad ones, right?
Yes.
There is value in that.
That's the word, the perceived bad ones. If you take the time to learn from Ms. Take, um, you could really develop the skills that are needed to learn the lessons from the perceived bad ones, and then add them together with the ones that you think are just like totally bring you so much elation that you could add them together. And that's why it's valuable.
Right.
And that's why it's not just your scholastic experience or your work experience, but all of your experiences that adds value. And that's why they say, the human resources is one of the biggest assets companies have. But intuitively, I don't think people get it. But if you're living authentically, which is not, it's difficult to do in some spaces,
Sure.
right? Some spaces you have to protect yourself or high priority yourself. But if you're able to do that,
Go ahead.
sky's the limit.
Make it so, right?
Make it so.
One last question, Celina, I want to ask you before we get out of here. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time here. And obviously, the Audacious Living podcast, we talk about boldness and courageousness and all these wonderful traits. Wondering, something we like to ask our guests, if you'd identify the most audacious thing that you've ever done over the course of your career, when you reflect back on that, what would you say that is?
I would say just, putting down the roadmap, the plan, and just allowing the universe to unfold as it should. I don't think I would have gotten into politics if I had stuck to the plan, of changing directions with my business. So just opening up myself to possibilities, I think requires a certain amount of faith, and a certain amount of audacity to jump into. So I'm excited for the now. I'm excited for the next, but I don't know what that is yet. So keep letting the universe unfold, I guess.
Well, that's it. Well, and the part I like about that, and thank you for that, because when we take that sort of bold step, if you will, and we may not know where we're going, but we take it anyways. We take that, take that leap. But what it also does, it inspires the people behind us, right? And that's a part that just, it's thrilling, because and for some people, taking chances isn't a big deal. It's like, this is what I do. And sure, there are people like that. And to them, they're just being themselves. And by being themselves, those behind us are going, oh my gosh, Celina did it, Audley do it, I can do it too, kind of a thing. So,
Yeah.
so for me, I hold on tight to that, because as much as you're doing it for yourself, you're also doing it for others too.
Yeah. And it's the example, right? It's the reaching back as you climb, but it's also just leading by example and saying, there isn't really an exact roadmap. This isn't an exact science of how we do things. But I think if we're led by the passion and purpose that is embedded in Audacity, then that's what should be the guiding principle. That's what should carry us forward. And I think that's what I love about this journey that I'm on now, which took me 45 years to figure out.
You're here. That's all that counts, is you're here. That's all that matters. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's so great. Please let our listeners and viewers know where they can grab a copy of your book if they want. And I strongly encourage that they do so.
Yeah, so it's available. Just go to my website, celinacc.ca/book. And all the links are there to purchase. But if you ever in doubt, you could just follow me on any social media. I am Celina CC. Send me a DM and I will make sure I answer any of your questions.
Awesome. Celina, again, thank you so much for the time. So much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Audley. This was wonderful, and continue to use your platform to bring out the audacity in so many more people. So thank you so much.
Back we are here on the Audacious Living podcast, and I first off want to send a big thanks to Celina for being on the program and sharing your story as candidly as you did. It was really great to hear from your perspective as you reflect on your finished product and the lessons that you're still learning, which is completely awesome. As I said when we spoke, she really exposed a lot of her personal life, and that couldn't have been easy, but she did so in such a remarkable fashion and with such grace, and that's really improved the overall quality of her book. And that's why, to our listeners, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of your very own. I guarantee you that you will not be disappointed. Speaking of disappointment, we've sadly come to the end of another edition of the Audacious Living podcast. It's always great to share with you, and I'm always so appreciative of the listeners taking the time to include this podcast as part of their day. I believe me when I say I've got great appreciation and thankfulness to all of you for doing so. As always, you can visit bestaudaciouslife.com to keep up to speed with all things going on in the world of the Audacious Living podcast, as well past episodes. They're all there as well, or even just generally staying connected. That certainly would be the best way. Well, that's it. So until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another, show love, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.